Our speaker today is Dave Lucas. He is a consultant with both charter or public charters and corporate flight management. And they are the provider that the Airport Commission has voted to provide EAS services for Victoria. So if you would please help me in welcoming Dave Lucas. Dave?
Thank you all so much. Before I get started, did I hear right that you all actually like the weather that you're experiencing today? I was all set to apologize for bringing it with me from beautiful sunny Cleveland, Ohio. I will not steal the Chamber's thunder on this matter, but
You got to work with me.
It's a lot more like home here than I expected. So, thank you. Again, my name is Dave Lucas. I'm an outside advisor to both Public Charters, Inc. and Corporate Flight Management. Our purpose in coming here today is to talk a little bit about an upcoming change in service provider for the essential air service at the airport. The overall objective of why are we here? We're here to find a way to give the community a bigger, better aircraft and a better service pattern to stimulate a lot of activity and to do so within the regulatory framework which air carriers have to operate in and with the available subsidy dollars that the program allows for your community. Now, there are lots of air carriers in the United States, as you know. Many of them operate under some different sets of rules depending on the size of aircraft that they have, the type of service they're providing, and so forth. My clients can meet your objective by operating a 19-seat turboprop pressurized commuter aircraft, that's a mouthful, on a program called a public charter, which is a form of service that is done under an authority granted by the Special Authorities Division of the DOT, runs in accordance with the published timetable, and tickets are sold by the seat and so forth. And it has to be subsidized under something called the Alternate Essential Air Service Program. And before we start flipping through charts here and looking at slides, let me explain to the best I can some of the basics about what is alternate EAS as opposed to traditional EAS and what's a public charter. And let's start with what is a public charter. The easiest way to think of it is it's a federally licensed distributorship arrangement that is provided by two separate yet equally important flight operators. The indirect air carrier who sells the tickets and the direct air carrier who flies the aircraft. The indirect air carrier, as the name suggests, and these are actually words in the federal regulations that authorize these type of programs, is a person who doesn't have FAA authority to fly an airplane for compensation or hire. Those are terms in the regs. Under a public charter program, that individual or entity can go to someone who does have FAA authority in aircraft, make an arrangement with that operator, and then resell in accordance with a timetable and a ticket price flights on that airplane. And it may be for one flight for a special event, like a Super Bowl trip or a gambling junket, or it may be for a longer program of operation like we're proposing here. There are, public charters have been around for a long time. I think the regulations go back at least to the 1980s. They may actually be 1970s. I don't recall exactly when they were enacted. But they're used surprisingly, maybe about 100 to 120 programs a year. You very rarely hear about this because this is sort of a regulatory rulemaking that goes on in the background. You only see, what shows up at your airport or what tickets or what programs you may buy if you're actually using the service. But there's, like I said, maybe 100 or 120 programs a year, either new programs or continuations of old programs. Centennial Airport is an example of one that uses public charters on an unsubsidized basis to fly as an alternative to Denver's airport. Most of the air commerce between the United States and Cuba, and yes, there is air commerce between the United States and Cuba, happens on public charter flights as opposed to more traditional airline flights. So it's something that's been around for a long time. Just a lot of people don't hear about it because as a customer, you generally don't care about the regulatory mechanism, you care about the outcome. So that's what a public charter is in a very simplified format. Again, it's basically an arrangement between somebody who doesn't have an airplane and somebody who does to resell those things. In order to do that, you get US DOT approval. You have to meet some very stringent financial requirements in order to get the federal license, and then you have to adhere to a lot of different and very stringent federal requirements in order to keep the license and run your particular program. And we'll go through a little slide that kind of compares what you have now to the regulations under the form of operation that we propose to the airport. So that's public charters. What is alternate EAS? Alternate EAS is a program that was created back in 2004. It was an effort to give more local control and authority to EAS communities. Many of you, being an EAS community, many of you probably know that the Essential Air Service Program was created in 1978 as part of the package of regulation that ultimately wound up in airline deregulation, and it guaranteed that small communities who were likely to lose air service as a result of deregulation would continue to have connectivity to the national air service network. Well, as the program has grown and evolved since 1978, one of the significant criticisms is that Washington, unfortunately, was controlling a lot of, or all of the service providers particularly when there was a service issue, particularly when someone wanted to change carriers. Washington was dictating who that would be and what size airplane you get, who the operator would be, and so forth. Alternate EAS is a program that communities opt into. And by the way, contrary to what you may have read in the newspaper, communities can opt out of at any time without losing their traditional EAS eligibility. And what it does is it brings the funding and the decision making from Washington to the local community. So the general framework under which we're going to which our clients are going to operate is the airplane. We got one depicted there on the first slide. In public charter service under the operating framework that I described, with the funds going to and being controlled by the local community. So that's let's talk about the two operating partners. The first, Public Charters Inc. Their name is admittedly a little on the nose for what they do, but there's a reason for that. One of the rules is when someone is flying a public charter flight, you got to tell them that it's a public charter flight. Jim Gallagher, the owner of Public Charter, said, well, if I've got to tell them, the easiest way is to name my company Public Charters. So there you have it. Clever guy, Jim. I like him a lot. And he pays promptly, by the way. Jim's original background was not aviation. He kind of got into brokering large group charter trips sort of by accident. He was writing a master's thesis and went up to the airport one day back in, I think this was 1994 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and got himself a job brokering charter flights. And somewhere during his aviation odyssey, he asked the question, well, we've got these public charters. We sell them by the seat, but somebody who would normally be our customer can't find out about them because they can't go on the web and search, travel agents don't know about them, and so forth. It was basically a 1970s way of selling tickets. It was all done with paper. So Jim, not knowing what he could and couldn't do, started petitioning all of the various entities that handle all the processing and sorting and publishing and posting of airline tickets and said, hey, how do I I've got a public charter, how do I put it out where people can buy it? And ultimately, he, and I believe this was back in 2009 or late 2008, received approval, and he is the only person ever in life who has been approved to do this, received the approval to publish public charter inventory on the systems that travel agents use, the systems that the websites that you might go on to book a trip online and so forth. Jim and I started working together about that time when I was running another commuter air carrier that operated 30-passenger airplanes. And building on Jim's thought about selling these trips in a more modern electronic fashion, we said, well, if we can do this and we have the authority to run these public charter programs, why couldn't we do essential air service routes and tap into markets that gave us a little bit more stability with a subsidy and a built-in passenger base and a history of operations where we wouldn't encounter the competition that you would have at a major airport from more traditional mainline carriers. We hit upon the idea of trying to go and bid on EAS contracts. We did. Back in 2010, when I was teamed with Jim, Manistee, Michigan wanted to award a contract to us. DOT said, well, great idea, you can do exactly what you're doing, but because it's a public charter and not some of these other types of flights, we can't award you a traditional EAS contract. So we went back to the drawing board, spent a few nights going through the federal regulations, and we discovered this alternate essential air service program that nobody had ever used before. And we went about the process of getting approvals. During that time period, I left the air carrier that had been teamed with Jim, but Jim persevered and was awarded the first ever alternate essential air service contract in Manistee, Michigan, which he's successfully operated for the last 2 years, and we'll talk a little bit about his performance on that contract a little later in the show. Jim has been in business, as I mentioned, since the mid-90s. Public Charters, Inc., who will actually be the principal in the contract with the community, what was a spin-off of one of his other entities to try to make a little bit more organizational sense for him in 2009. And Public Charters is also, by the way, the entity that holds the contract with the community in Manistee, Michigan. And if you remember our discussion a moment ago about what is an indirect air carrier, Jim, in this case, is the indirect air carrier. He is the ticket seller. So that's what you remember about Public Charters and Jim Gallagher. Corporate Flight Management, another one of my clients, is a Part 135 commuter air carrier. It's the same FAA approval and the same DOT economic approval that your current carrier has. The Corporate Flight Management certificate also allows them to fly airplanes that have up to 30 seats. The Sun Air certificate, as I understand it, is limited to 9 seats. In this way, we're able to, CFM can actually offer, as long as we're conducting the flights as public charters, a 19-passenger Jetstream aircraft, and we'll look at that in just a second. CFM is a very strong operator in business since the early 1980s. Awesome safety record. They're one of only 5% of all rated operators that have achieved the Argus Platinum rating. Argus is an independent rating firm. And they also are one of the very few Level 2 certified ISBAO operators in the United States. And ISBAO is a standard for charter operators, corporate flight departments, small commercial carriers that mandate certain internal, think of it like ISO 9000 for an air carrier. In other words, it's a series of audits, approvals, and systems that you have in place in order to achieve the standard, and it results in a very low defect rate across the board, from operations to maintenance to administrative matters. And corporate flight management here occupies the role of the direct air carrier. So what are we going to do? Well, after consulting with the community, we decided on a routing program that's different than what you have now. And I know some people like Houston. I know some people are interested in a change. We are going to rely on the statistics and the surveys and look at a routing service change that will result in one-stop service. We proposed to 6 days a week between your airport, intermediate stop in Austin, final turn in Dallas. And to that, we're proposing adding on 3 days a week at this point an additional round trip just between your airport and Austin. Our proposal says Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We have a lot of flexibility on the days that those operate. And if demand requires it, we certainly have the flexibility to add additional flight rotations. This is what we've gone to the community with at this point. This is what's being considered as part of the funding proposal in Washington. We're going to fly it in a Jetstream 3100 or 3200 commuter aircraft. Jetstream is a very time-tested design. The Jetstream that we're looking at is what I like to call the Generation 2. They were constructed primarily between 1982 and 1996. I think about 380 some of them were built. A substantial portion are flying around the world. I mentioned before, it's a pressurized cabin. It has about a 260, 65 mile an hour cruise speed as I have up there, so it's relatively fast. And one of the important things I think for the community in solving one of the issues that you've had recently is it's got quite a bit more baggage space than a Piper Navajo aircraft, which is currently serving you. And the reason I chose this landing picture is you get a good, if you look right under the wings, you can see the lower baggage, exterior baggage pod in the rear of the aircraft, and I'll show you in a layout of that in just a moment. There's also a pressurized aft baggage cabin. So you've got about 85 cubic feet of baggage space. If you are, one of the things that we looked at even this morning is if, for example, you're transporting firearms and so forth, you're going on a hunting trip, we can put it in the belly pod, no problem. That pod has enough room. I think CFM has had a dozen golf bags in there. So it's got pretty good cubic foot space as well as a fairly high weight limit. The aircraft can fly at up to about 25,000 feet, which puts you above most of the bad weather. If you get above about 15,000 feet, even on a bad day, you're in fairly comfortable airspace. I don't think you'll get that altitude between here and Austin, but you can certainly get that altitude between Austin and Dallas to give you a fairly comfortable flight without a lot of weather delays. It's also important to note that the airplane is fully de-ice equipped, so you can go even in bad weather. I know it's not as big a deal as it is in this market as it may be in some, but that is a go, no-go item. And in addition to having the airframe fully de-ice equipped, CFM has a full de-ice program, so they can get in and out, de-ice anti-ice program, I should say. They can get in and out in most bad weather situations controlled by icing. The aircraft also has Freon air conditioning, so when you're on the ground, I know that is a consideration here. It's comfortable in the airplane on the ground. Not today, I know it's not today, but on many days it is a consideration on the ground, and of course it's got full cabin climate control during flight operations, so you're not too warm, too cold, and so forth. The airplane also has a lot of the modern safety goodies that you don't get in general aviation aircraft. Probably one of the more important is TCAS, or traffic collision avoidance system, which actually augments what air traffic control does in telling you where other airplanes are in your airspace, and tells you if you're on a path that might involve a collision, and then allows you to take evasive action long before that happens. So this is, you're getting a real commuter airliner in the Jetstream aircraft. On the monitors, you'll see a cabin layout. Most, but not all, of the CFM aircraft are equipped with a lavatory. It is if there's not a lavatory in it, it's a closet, which gives you a little bit of extra baggage space, and the seating is 1 by 2. And for an hour to an hour and a half flight, you're in a very comfortable airplane as far as legroom and so forth. It's not like being in a private jet, but it'll get you there, and most times your bags will be able to go with you. If you and 18 of your best friends show up with your trade show booths and everything, I'm sorry, this airplane is not going to have the capacity for that. if you show up with your big roller bag and your overnight bag, we can handle it. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that CFM's CFM's been operating the Jetstream, I think, since the late 80s. And in fact, at one point, they were actually an American Eagle regional partner. They actually flew the Jetstream for American Eagle. So they've got, and American Eagle was the big delivery partner here in the United States for this aircraft. So they've got a long history of successful and safe operations. They have a lot of approvals to fix things on the airplane in-house. They can overhaul landing gear. They can overhaul what's called a starter generator, which is in any aircraft that's a failure-prone piece that without it you can't start the engines, and even if you could, you wouldn't have any electric power to the aircraft. So they can fix those in-house. They've got about $5 million worth of Jetstream spares, including spare airframes at their main location in Smyrna, Tennessee, which that's about 20 minutes south of Nashville. So they're relatively close. If there's a part needed, if there's work needed on the airplane, there's a lot of depth of resources within CFM to get parts and personnel to get the airplane back and running. And not only that, at present they have 5 of the 19-seat airplanes in their charter fleet, and they have 4 aircraft which have 29 or 30 passenger seats. That's what I call the Generation 3 Jetstream aircraft. So if there's a substitution needed, if something has to go down for regular maintenance, it should be transparent to the local community for the most part. And also, I would argue, and this has actually been done in other markets, if you use the service, if the enplanements go up, and we've actually made this commitment, my clients have actually made this commitment in writing to the airport, we will look at the economics and how to get you a 30-seater, perhaps either seasonally or permanently, to run this rotation, or if we want to augment it with a one-off trip or additional routings, we can look at doing that as well. So what are we proposing in terms of other qualitative aspects of the operation? Our analysis indicates that on average we can do $59 one way to Austin, $89 one way to Dallas. The modeling that we've done is very heavily weighted at this point towards Dallas passengers, almost 4 to 1 based on the information that we have. We may do some yield management, so on certain days you may see a fare that's slightly higher or slightly lower than the $59, but that's really our target number and can comfortably run this program, pay for the airplane, pay to maintain it, pay for the crew, pay for fuel, and all the good stuff that you have to do at a 50% enplanement level with the subsidy that's available to us. So we're very confident day in and day out that this number makes the program work. If we're seeing higher enplanements, if the demand is there, certainly we can look at fare adjustments, but this is what we're going to go out of the gate with in terms of average fares. I was talking a little bit about Jim Gallagher and public charters before. As part of getting his approvals for the distribution of public charter inventory, Jim actually put together a team of programmers and wrote his own scheduling and ticket selling platform. It's called CRS Manager, and he can do what the industry calls an e-ticket with real-time connectivity to the other systems. So if your travel agent is going to book, they can connect to his system. I heard that there's a number of your organizations that use BCD, I believe it is, Travel, and American Express and Carlson. All of those travel agents can connect to Jim's system and book his inventory. So if you're using either you have them in-house or you have an outside service that's booking your travel, Jim's system and all the inventory for this flight and any other flight that Jim offers, the public charter offers, can appear instantly in their system. They're booking him now, booking his tickets now, so we know that it works flawlessly. We're going to continue in Victoria to have full TSA screening. Corporate Flight Management has all the approvals necessary with TSA to fly to the main terminal in both Austin and in Dallas. You'll notice in a number of EAS markets, particularly I know Jackson, Mississippi is this way, flying into Nashville, there is no more TSA in the local community, and they're flying into a private terminal and being shuttle bused over to the main terminal. We're going to preserve your ability to be screened here and flown to the main terminal at both Austin and in Dallas. At present, Public Charters uses the exact same baggage transfer model that Southwest Airlines uses. That is, if you're flying Southwest and you're going to have part of your journey on another air carrier, you do need to retrieve your bags and recheck them. Public Charters, though, does a little bit better than Southwest in that for outbound passengers, if you have a carry-on that you've checked on your leg into the hub airport, their folks on the ground will gate check that bag for you with the other carrier. Now, we have a number of customers in a number of markets that want a higher level of service than what's presently being offered. We are presently working a program using people that are already available at the hub airport to accomplish baggage transfer without interline agreements between Public Charters and all carriers. I'm going to be a little bit cagey about and circumspect in talking about it, because right now we're at the corporate approval level with one main air carrier. Once we get them on board, we have to get this by TSA. TSA is a wild card. They may like it, they may not. If it works, we're going to roll it out. At present, we're scheduled to roll it out at another airport first as a proof of concept. If everybody buys off on it, we'll roll it out to all locations. Since you're looking, at least right now, at an October 1st start date, I don't know if it'll be ready for prime time, and like I said, I don't know what TSA will say about this program, but I'm reasonably, it's one of those things that makes sense, and will probably say no. But I will be cautiously optimistic that with everybody's support, direct air carrier, mainline carrier support, local support, and the program the way that we've written it, that they'll at least let us try it. So understand you're always going to have the basic Southwest, or I also call it the self-service baggage model. We're looking at this intermediate, better level of service, hopefully that will get approved. And I think by the time that you start, we'll also have a third-party arrangement in place for a third-party baggage service that you can contract with that would actually pick up your bags and deliver them to your final destination without taking them to the airport. That service would not be free, and I would argue that this baggage transfer program that I've been outlining will probably have a cost to it. So at the end of the day, it'll be up to you. If you don't want to pay anything, go get your bags. If you want to pay a little something, maybe we'll have this intermediate program approved. If you want to pay a lot and have somebody and avoid the whole problem in its entirety, we'll have an option for that as well. And so I expect that to be done by the fall. I've got the ball on that particular project for both of my clients, so we're working it through pretty actively right now. One other thing I wanted to mention is that Public Charters has its own in-house call center. Typically, the call center is active during the times that flights are scheduled, but they work evenings and weekends too. There's a call-in schedule. If there is a mechanical, if there is a weather event, it's all hands on deck, and everybody participates to make sure that the passengers are taken care of. And I think if any of you care to talk to Barry Lind, who's the airport manager in Manistee, where Public Charters is operating right now with CFM, I think they can speak to the responsiveness and a few situations where rebookings and issues have occurred. I want to go back a little bit to the discussion of the regulation, if you can stay awake with me through this for about another 5 minutes. I want to compare and contrast a little bit the attributes of the service that you have right now versus the operation that's going to be conducted by Public Charters and corporate flight management. What you have right now, what you've had in the past, and what you will have in the future is a service, first of all, that operates in accordance with published timetables. You will also be buying individual tickets. Unlike your service right now, the funds for your tickets under the new public charter alternate EAS have to be held in escrow until the flight operates. That means that the air carrier does not get your money until they flew the flight that they promised you. This is a passenger protection feature that is available only under the public charter framework. Right now, if you're to buy a ticket on your current service, as soon as the credit card settlement hits the bank, that goes to the air carrier. Your money is gone. Whether or not they fly the flight has nothing to do with your payment. Here, under the public charter, you've got to fly the flight in order to get paid. In addition to that, the DOT requires a surety bond. Public charters have on file a surety bond that protects refunds. So if in the event that you're owed a refund and something happens for whatever reason where the escrow money can't cover that refund, the surety bond responds to make sure that your money is prepaid to you in full. There's another interesting feature about public charters. Unlike the kinds of flights that you get today and the flights that you've had in the past, there is a regulatory prohibition against the cancellation of a flight within 10 days of its scheduled departure, except for a circumstance which makes it impossible to perform the flight. That means that public charters, unlike other operators, can't cancel a flight just because, oh, there's only one person on the airplane today. Or maybe we'll consolidate all these flights down into one and we'll make it go later. They have to fly by regulation. What are the things that allow them to cancel? Weather, mechanical breakdown, airspace restriction. For example, if the president comes to visit and you've got what's called a temporary flight restriction where you cannot fly, those are the sorts of things that allow a cancellation. Other than that, you've got to fly. And that's, it's one of the secret things that a lot of people don't get, particularly about small programs. You got to show up as the air carrier. If you cancel, if you consolidate flights, if you don't show up, people stop using your service, and maybe your community has seen a little bit of that. It is a great thing about that framework. The other thing that I like, and I mentioned it before, is that operating under alternate EAS allows the community an unprecedented level of input and control over what public charters and CFM are doing. Traditional essential air service is administrated out of an office in Washington. The new head of that office is a gentleman named Kevin Schlemmer, and Kevin's a nice guy. We've met him, talked to him numerous times, but Kevin's responsible for every EAS market. And there are complaints coming from every EAS market all the time, and some of them have merit, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, it's a Washington administrative bureaucratic process. Here, you know who's responsible for your air service, and you know who's providing it, and I know where they live. So if we need to go talk to them, Jason, I told you this morning, if we need to go talk to them, we can go find them. I don't think you're going to have any situation like that. I think what you're going to find is that there's a lot more of a reason to partner locally. And if we can talk a little bit about alternate EAS at Manistee Blacker, who are the folks who kind of took one for the team and took the plunge and were the very first alternate EAS market, we can see a little bit of the benefit that they've gotten by being in this program. One of the things I really want to point out to all of you is the completion rate for public charters and corporate flight management during the last basically 13-month period, March 12th to March 13th. 98%. Only, believe it or not, only one cancellation for weather. And I believe Manistee gets about 86 inches of snow every year, which is a few inches more, Jason, than you bet your. Just check. I didn't want to misstate anything, so just checking with you. There were a handful of maintenance issues, by and large, because corporate flight management has an airline-style maintenance management program. They're able to handle maintenance issues in a very effective way. So at the end of the day, I believe there were 4 cancellations in total for weather and for maintenance. There were 2 kind of big maintenance delays, but that's about it. I think both of those were cleared within 4 hours, which is inconvenient, but the flights were actually able to be completed, and there were no crew-related cancellations. The statistics I saw said that, except for what you see up on the monitors here, all the flights departed Manistee, and all the flights departed and arrived at Midway within 15 minutes of the scheduled time, which is basically the on-time performance metric that's used at the DOT level. So they've done a really outstanding job, and I think you're going to see exactly that kind of level of responsiveness here. I mentioned, I think, before that seasonally that this route has had a 30-seat aircraft on it. We talked a little bit about evaluating that here as enplanements increase and the routes take hold. We certainly have, there's certainly a history of being able to do that. Right now, that contract is in renegotiation with the local community. I believe that the community has gone to the feds and asked for a 4-year extension, and I think we're kind of looking at a 4-year, we proposed a 4-year agreement, I believe, to the community here. So with that, I'm being told that, as usual, I've talked way too long, way too much, you're all falling asleep. So I'll thank you very much for your attention. I'll be around for a little while after the discussion, and thank you so much for having us. We look forward to getting started.
Dave, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. Just a couple of reminders. Tomorrow, ribbon cutting and grand opening of American Bake at 4:30. On the 17th, we'll be hosting a job fair at Warriors Weekend in Port O'Connor. On the 20th, S&C Senior Care, ribbon cutting at 10 a.m. Medical Committee is on the 21st. Elegant Limousines is on the 23rd. And then the Chamber Golf Tournament is June 12th. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of the Chamber, and y'all have a great day.